Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Today, I'm joined by an amazing guest, but before I introduce them to you, I want to ask that you please like and subscribe below. That way, we can continue to bring you these incredible stories. And if you're already liked and subscribed to our channel, we thank you for all of your support. Today's episode, we are with Diana Wentworth. Diana, how are you?
I am good. It's so fun to be with you. I know we can talk forever.
Forever. Yeah, you asked, how long is this going to be? And I said, probably 3.5 hours. And you were like, better rearrange some of my schedule. Kind of one of the things that we try and bring to our viewers, right, is we are either trying to bring an inspirational story, a motivational story, or show something that someone's went through so that other people can fast forward their life and maybe avoid pitfalls or mistakes, or just sometimes we bring on the most powerful people that have done so much stuff and are so influential in the world. Before we get into much of that, I have this thing here that I created that I found a lot of the information as I was researching you. A very dear friend of both of ours turned me on to you, and I'm like, okay, let me read up about this lady, and I'm like, okay, now we've got to get her on the show immediately. So unfortunately, this is the quickest we could get you on the show with our schedules, but you're here now, and we are grateful for you to be here.
Terrific. I can't wait.
So I'm going to tell you this. You've probably heard it because you live the story, but there were a top 10 reasons why people need to listen to Diana Wentworth. Appeared on Oprah, CNN, Good Morning America, been featured in People magazine, co-authored 2 of the New York Times best-selling Chicken Soup for the Soul cookbooks that have sold nearly 1 million copies.
My one book sold 1 million copies. It sold 500 million copies.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. You just let me roll down this thing. I could stop there and be fulfilled in this podcast. Like, okay, that's like the most important person I've ever met. So it's just insane. Best-selling dramatic memoir, Send Me Someone, was sold to Lifetime Network to be made into a movie. Found the Inside Edge, which is the weekly breakfast meetings throughout Southern California. Featured all the leading transformational speakers over 26 years. Board of Advisors, Jack Canfield, Michael Beckwith, Wayne Dyer. Are you kidding me? Listen to these names. Are you kidding me? And we have the co-host of the longest-running TV series on cooking and entertainment and is still booked as a celebrity chef. Written 9 award-winning books and has sold a combined total of over 1 million copies, which we're going to talk about. It's way more now. We're talking about 500 million. Launched countless 6- and 7-figure careers throughout her vast expertise and connections. Beloved speaker, keynote speaker, decades of doing this stuff. I mean, if you just read that alone, it's like the most impressive thing I've ever seen. And then I got to talk to you. The first conversation, I am like, oh my God, I could talk to this woman all day, every day. And this is something that touched me because I thought, whenever I'm doing a podcast, I'm thinking, what's the line we're going to go down? Is this motivational, inspirational? What is this? What are we doing here? I am incredibly grateful that you're willing to come on our show and tell us a little bit about you, kind of open up to some things. But having heard all of that, it almost sounds exhausting because I'm still on line 1 and you're on line 10. And we're going to I was going to save a little bit to the end, but your husband just passed, and it's so sorry to hear that. And I know, and I felt the love that you guys had. So that was something. And you and I had some discussions during that time. And after we had a moment, and what you told me then is still affecting me today. I still hear it in my ears today. You're like, you know what? I'm gonna see about myself now, and I'm gonna do some things now that I want to do. And it was just so powerful to see how much stuff you've done in life, and yet you continue to push. And so that is my inspiration, but now we need to hear this out of your mouth.
Okay. Where shall I start?
You should start, why don't we start with Elvis?
Oh, okay.
Let's get him out of the way.
Okay, poor Elvis. To tell his story. When I was 18, I was at UCLA and I belonged to a sorority, and we were on the pledge porch. And I said to the gals, I said, can you turn that music down? And somebody said, oh, Diana doesn't like Elvis Presley. And this was the first moment that I had a kind of a prescient feeling. It was the strangest thing, because I said, actually, I do like him and I'm going to date him someday. I just have to put, this is so weird. It was like a frog jumped out of my mouth. You know, I mean, I'd never felt like that before. And everybody looked at me, their jaws dropped. And it was the strangest thing, because he was in the army in Germany at the time. I mean, I don't know where this came from, but it was a knowing. It turned out that about, let me see, that must have been in May. I think in June, my mother took me to Europe for the first time on a cook's tour. And it started in Paris. And we were staying at a hotel called the Prince de Galles. And the second day there, this kid from our tour comes running up to me and says, Diana, Elvis Presley's in the dining room. And I'm too scared to ask him for an autograph. And I said, oh, well, come with me. So we walked up, and he was just standing there with these two. It turned out they were bodyguards. I didn't know who they were at the time, but he was in his army uniform, looking incredible. And I just walked right up to him and I said, hi, I'm Diana Webb from Beverly Hills, and Bobby would like your autograph. And long story short, I mean, I could go on for quite a while here. Long story short, he asked me if I would go with him to the Lido nightclub that night. And, you know, thinking back on it, obviously he needed a girl on his arm so that he wouldn't be ripped to shreds by all the women there. So I actually got to go with him to the Lido nightclub, and he was so nice to me, and he was a lovely man. He really was. And we sat right next to the stage. All the showgirls with the topless showgirls came up. You know, it was just a scene out of nowhere. The thing is that, how did I know that? You know, that's what stayed with me. I actually ended up knowing him over a period of 2 years and went out with him 3 more times in Los Angeles. But the fact that something in me had this knowing that that was going to happen empowered me so much in the rest of my life, because I've really gone on gut instinct into different things. That my different careers have kind of revealed themselves like a stone in the mist, so, you know, a stepping stone. It's been amazing. So is that enough about Elvis?
That's enough of, I mean, that's just impressive. And every time I hear a story, you know, I'm thinking about you know, what's the story behind the story, right? It's just, you had the guts, you had the courage, you just walk right up there and say that. Then it turns into this. And then again, it kind of starts lining up your life where you're headed. And that's just so powerful to me.
Yeah, I actually wrote about all of that in my book, Send Me Someone, and in the Chicken Soup for the Soul cookbook. It tells the whole story of all the dates and everything. But in a nutshell, it was such a crucial thing, because it taught me to trust an inner knowing that I followed that all my life.
And it's obvious, all the stuff that you've done. Give us this kind of layout from that point up until now. Like, your career is so amazing.
Well, I grew up in Beverly Hills, and my father was manic depressive, and I made up my mind very early that the most important thing to me was to have a true bond, a true partner in marriage. And that I lived for that. I mean, I was quite boy crazy at the time. And I really always wanted, more than anything, to have a great relationship. And so I left UCLA early. I was much more interested in cooking and so on. And my parents took me on a trip. Oh, I was engaged to somebody who turned out to be this very, very incredibly wealthy man. I had no idea how wealthy he was, but I had a sudden knowing that I should not marry him. He didn't know who I was. I was just kind of arm candy to him. I knew that he didn't really care, you know, who I was as a human being. And I picked up the phone and broke the engagement. And it happened to be the night before my parents were leaving on a trip to Asia. And so we went on this wonderful trip to Asia. I never regretted breaking the engagement. And I just had this knowing that I was in the right place, doing the right thing. And we arrived in Hong Kong, and that was our last stop. I woke up very early in the morning and for some reason got all dressed up, really dressed up, and went and stood down in the lobby. And it was like 7:30 in the morning. Well, it was earlier even. The restaurant wasn't even open. And I was standing in the middle of the lobby thinking, what am I doing here? And the elevator opened and these two men walked out. And I looked at one of them and he was just incredibly good looking and amazing. His partner was called to the telephone and he ended up standing right next to me. And he said, so where are you from? And 3 days later, we were engaged. I know it all sounds like that. It wasn't fantasy every day of my life, but I mean, I had some pretty exciting things. That was Paul von Wellenitz. And we were married a year to the day from that date. And we were married for 25 years. We had an incredible marriage. He passed away from cancer eventually, but we had a long, wonderful career in cooking and entertaining because while I was waiting around for him to arrive in my life, I attended some classes at the Cordon Bleu in Paris. And I just was following cooking as a passion, you know, it was something I was really interested in. I loved cooking for my friends and so on. So when we got married, it turned out that I started teaching cooking classes in my kitchen right after my daughter was born. And I was housebound suddenly, you know, I didn't know what to do with myself. And so I put chairs in the kitchen and I had a babysitter for the baby and all these incredibly wonderful women and a couple of men too would come to my cooking classes. And I taught people to cook and then to entertain and to do these incredible menus that would have a theme, but to do everything ahead of time so that when their company arrived, they would be able to be with them. And I'm going to cut some of it short because a lot of it, we went to live in Mexico. We had all these things happen. But finally, we were living in Mexico and I was just wondering what in the world I was doing with my life. And I got the notion that I had to write a cookbook because I had all these cooking classes that I had done and people would love. And it took me 5 years, but I did get that book done and it was called The Pleasure of Your Company. And that cookbook won Cookbook of the Year in the category of entertaining. It was an uphill battle. I made it sound like that was just all the easiest segue that anybody ever lived through, but there was a lot of torturous having to learn to write a book. You know, I didn't know that you double spaced a manuscript. I was living in Mexico, and in Mexico the power goes out every hour, so you know, I had an electric typewriter, so you know I'd be on a roll, and I mean it was just hilarious. It was a long journey, but that was a life-changing moment when that book won Cookbook of the Year in the category of entertaining. And my husband and I were a team. He loved food and art, and he would make art out of the food. He would garnish things. He did the most exquisite presentation, and he was just drop dead gorgeous. So the women loved him to be in the class too. So he looked a lot like you, Mitch, actually.
Oh, it's your eyes. It's your eyes.
But anyway, we went ahead and had a long career. We had 6 cookbooks. We had a cooking school on Sunset Boulevard where I would just call up Wolfgang Puck in those days. He was the chef at a restaurant called Ma Maison that was had an unlisted number. And that was such a funny thing about that restaurant. You couldn't make a reservation. But anyway, I would say, Wolfgang, come over and teach a class at our school. We had this school on Sunset Boulevard. And he would say, okay, he says, I'll bring the food and you'll pay me $200. So you know how long ago this was. But all the top chefs and lots of celebrities came to the cooking classes. And then we were hired by a department store to be their spokespersons and to travel all over the country and do all of that. So that was career number 1. Very entrepreneurial from the get-go.
Yes, you are.
I don't know how to work for somebody else. We're just kind of making it up.
The beauty in this story, literally your whole entire story is, again, as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, this is as valuable today as any time. I think we get so pigeonholed into having to have a job, and then we start living up to the means of that job, and just listening to you, how all the chances you take and all the things that it was like, no, I'm going to live for me and I'm going to do what I enjoy. And then you never work a day in your life. That's just how I picture your life. And yeah, it sounds like a fairy tale thing. It's amazing.
Well, there were lots of ups and downs because, in 1985, at the height of the Cold War, it happened to be a year that women went into the workforce in a big way. And they did not want to spend 3 days making a meal for their friends anymore. It just had no interest. And what was happening was these super chefs were on the scene, and it got pretty competitive. And it didn't have that feeling that I loved. I loved gathering people around the table. That was it. I didn't realize right away that I loved that even more than the food. Than the actual food and the cooking. I loved gathering people together. And our career was falling apart because nobody was interested in entertaining anymore. It just didn't have any appeal. So we were really tortured by how in the world were we going to make a living? There was not anything else that we could think of that we loved to do. And somebody insisted that we go to this early morning workshop. It was from 6 to 8 in the morning. It was an offshoot of EST. And you had to make a goal, set a goal that was almost impossible to achieve. And you had to be there from 6 to 8 every morning for 3 weeks. And it was wild. It was in this church in Hollywood. And there was something about it that was so invigorating. The people who were there were just fascinating. Most of them were from the entertainment industry. This woman who was running it wanted to transform the entertainment industry so it had more consciousness in it. And I personally had been following people, all of these people who were in self-help and everything, and studying that. I've always been fascinated by it. So anyway, we joined this early morning thing. We committed to it. We had to make a goal that was outrageous. So we decided that we would approach a vendor and get $100,000 to make videos that would play in all of the houseware department stores in the housewares department. And we thought this would be crazy if we could do this. Well, the first day we went out, made an appointment with Krups, which was a manufacturer of like coffee makers and so on. We told them all about it and they said, okay.
Okay.
This happened the first day, this was the craziest thing. And so we told the people who were running the seminar that we'd gotten our goal, and they said, well, what's your next goal? Well, we'd been hired by Abraham Strauss, which is a department store in New York, to choose 6 chefs from New York to bring them to New York because it was the time of the Olympics in Los Angeles. And they wanted to feature LA. LA was going to arrive in New York. And we had to write a book called LA Cuisine. And we had to choose the menu for the Brooklyn Academy of Music Gala. And all of this stuff. So we decided that we would get that book written in the 2 3/4 weeks left in this series. So, when you have to do something, sometimes you have to think outside the box. And I got to think the first part of this book was all menus and for entertaining of people in Los Angeles. And the second half had to be about all the top restaurants and how they were and what they were like that made them unique. So I thought, well, I can hire that part out. So I hired a writer from the Los Angeles Times food section to do the part on the restaurants, because I didn't even begin to know how to do that. And then the rest of them, I realized I had all these menus and stuff already. I just hadn't done anything with them yet. And so we worked really hard and got that goal done too. And unfortunately told them I'd gotten it done the day before it was due. And they made me set another goal. So I should have kept my mouth shut. But anyway, we got all that done, and it proved something to us. It proved to us that, we can do anything if we're really committed, if we're just if we just go for it. I mean, that's it. It's the action that you take that makes all the difference. And all your
100%.
considerations about the reasons you can't do this particular thing, they don't count because it's the action that you take. And that's what this seminar taught us. And also in this seminar was a man who I got to be very good friends with. And they announced at this seminar that there was going to be a group of people going into the Soviet Union to make a documentary. It was a really interesting group of people. It was Dennis Weaver and Mike Farrell from MASH and the real Patch Adams, Barbara Marx Hubbard, who was somebody who was a futurist who was amazing, Swami Satchidananda, and they invited us to go on this trip. We would have to come up with the money to go and be ready to go for 3 weeks into the Soviet Union and go out and mix with the Soviet people and go home with them and get to know them, because our countries were not talking to each other at that time.
Right.
And it was really confronting, but I went because of the people who were going to be on the trip, and not because I was caring that much about world peace at that point. But what happened was, when there were 80 of us, we went into the Soviet Union. Our job was to go out on the subways and get lost and talk to the people and get to know them. And of course, we were monitored by the Secret Service and all this stuff in Russia. We had to be very careful about what we said and everything. But what I noticed on that trip, and it was really magical, was that these people, all these people on our trip, were loners and they were activists. But once they started sharing their stories with each other, as we all sat around tables for the meals, was that all sorts of magic began to happen, because people had resources that they were sharing with each other. And Paul and I were still tortured by what we were going to do to make a living. But we came back from that trip, and at one of the meetings, the woman who led Impact, which was what the group was called, she said, "Okay, everybody, now in a minute, I'm going to point at one person in this group, and that person is going to be transported 5 years ahead. And you're going to see something, and you're going to tell us what you see." "Diana," she said, and I was like, oh, it was almost like a window opened, and I saw this giant, it was like a ballroom with a whole lot of people. And I knew that Paul and I had started this group, whatever it was, and that everybody was happy to be there, but they were all different walks of life and so on. And then the door closed. So I told the group about that. And that was my first vision of what we would call the inside edge. We decided that the hours that we were meeting, from 6 to 8 in the morning, were really magical hours, that if you were up right then and hanging out with a whole lot of motivated people, that incredible things would happen. So we decided to start something. We started at 6:30. We decided to sleep in a little bit, but 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning. And there were people in that group who we met. Jack Canfield had never written a book yet. Barbara DeAngelis, a man named Tim Peering, who had turned out to be really important to us. These people were just, you could tell they had all kinds of charisma. So we put them on our board of advisors so that other people would show up for breakfast at 6:30 in the morning. And we started out at a restaurant and soon moved to the Beverly Hills Hotel, because the head of PR there asked us to move the group there. But we would have up to 200 people in the morning, and we would have every speaker that anybody would want to hear. And that was the only place you could hear them then. There was no internet,
Right.
And if you wanted to hear Ram Dass and all these people, and I would invite Ram Dass and all these other people to come and speak, I would pay them $100, and I didn't pay them any travel expenses. Dan Millman, I mean, just everybody you can name.
Yeah.
Showed up at this meeting, and it became their community of choice, their family of choice. And we would give these outrageous parties where you had to show up as who you were going to be in 5 years. I was so impacted by the idea of seeing 5 years ahead. And people would show up and had to stay in the moment. You had to stay in character and tell everybody at the party who you were now, what you had done in those 5 years, what you had achieved. And one of my favorite ones was one woman, Dr. Susan Jeffers, showed up in a limousine with 3 mock books. And she said that she had just returned from her 3rd New York Times bestseller tour. And she actually did that. She had, in the next 5 years, she had 3 New York Times bestsellers. Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway was her first book. And so much came out of that, when you really just fantasize and then actually live it, actually become it and speak as if you're there. All kinds of magic happened. So we gave that party again on the Queen Mary, and Jack Canfield was there, and he wrote about it in his Success Principles book. And every training, he was on the Inside Edge Gala. We had the 35th anniversary gala just recently. And he was telling this story of how, because of that party, he has now used that 5-year in the future party thing for his closing event at every training he's ever done. And he also said that the Chicken Soup for the Soul series would never have existed without the Inside Edge. So,
you want to know something really crazy and fun? Because we obviously, paths collide all the time, and I did not learn about you from this same group of people. So Kate Maloney and I got in contact. Kate Maloney's Baby was the movie We Rise Up within is now Rise Up, with Tony Robbins, Michael Beckwith, Tom Chai, John Mackey, Jack Canfield, John DeMartini, Hubbard, everybody that you just mentioned is all part of this. This is decades later. It's the same thought leaders. It's the same people that are doing that stuff. And now with the digital format, of course, we all had kind of a different experience with the digital format because you can get it out there a lot easier. But it just warms my heart because the stories that you're telling are the same stories that I've just heard as we were at Sundance promoting Rise Up. So it was, it's the craziest thing because that's why I love these stories. So someone hears it from someone other than me. Mm-hmm. That same 5-year principle is still used by most of those people.
And that was a thought in my head. I just invented that. It was so much fun that it's had such an impact. I'm just so grateful.
Yeah, I remember Tony Robbins even in one of the things that he was talking about. He was like, if you see yourself where you're at right now, that's all the further you're going. And he uses the same principle, right? He uses different terminology to describe it, but that is the same principle.
That's right.
It's just funny how these worlds collide. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it was such an interesting time because it was like a petri dish of consciousness, really, where all sorts of things bloomed out of that particular era and that particular time. And we ended up having them on other chapters in 5 different cities. So that was what we did for 35 years after that, except my husband passed away after 4 years there.
But that also led you into Jack, right? This is where that manifested into your Chicken Soup for the Souls.
That was so amazing. It was one morning, Jack Canfield was speaking at the Inside Edge, and Mark Victor Hansen had driven up from Orange County to be with him. I had Jack here, Mark here, and Jack spoke about he was doing a book. I don't think he had the name yet, but he was doing this book, and it was going to be all these stories that speakers use, motivational speakers use, that made you laugh or cry, that were these really terrific stories. And he sat down, and Mark leaned across me and said, I'm going to do that book with you. And Jack said, you are? Jack said, why would I give that book to you? I've been working on it all this time. But anyway, here I am in the middle. So I've always thought of myself as like the womb. We had the sperm and the egg. And
right. And you made those bad boys happen.
I did. Yeah. And so, the first 2 books, well, of course, they had a hard time selling them. They were turned down by all publishers who said that anthologies don't work. And so about 2 years into it, my husband had passed away, and I was getting tired of being on the road and all by myself, carrying all these name tags and driving to these different cities. And I was remarried, and my husband, Ted Wentworth, he said, Diana, you can't keep leaving the house at 3:30 in the morning by yourself. This isn't good. And I decided that I I would turn it into a 501c3 and that other people would carry it forward. So have you ever worked a long time at a job and then suddenly you're not doing that job anymore?
Yes, this is what we're doing now.
I think so. We're all doing this now, but it's a very weird feeling because you're so attached to that persona. You're so locked into that. And it was weird for me. I didn't have to work anymore. And I didn't know who I was or what I wanted to do. And I kept saying to my husband, I said, I don't even know who I am anymore. He says, Diana, you still have a job. Your job is to follow your heart. So over time there, I started writing stories. I was intrigued by the Chicken Soup for the Soul, that people would share these stories, these motivational stories. And I liked writing, and I was learning to write that kind of writing. And so I started writing these stories, and I had about 16 of them. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with these. He said, Diana, you just keep doing it. You'll see, it'll be revealed to you. So it's the day before Thanksgiving. Let me see, it was 1994. The phone rings, and it's Jack and Mark on the phone. And they said, Diana, what are you doing right now? I said, well, I'm getting this turkey ready for tomorrow. They said, no, bring your cookbooks. We're at the Ayers Hotel, which was only about 3 or 4 miles away. We're with our publisher, and you're going to write the Chicken Soup for the Soul cookbook. I said, okay, I'll be right there. So I get in the car, I'm driving along, and I'm thinking, 101 chicken soup recipes. I don't know what is this going to be about. And then I got to think, food is such a catalyst for connection. If you're traveling, you meet people, lots of things happen around the table. And I've always loved that about it. So on the way over there, I got to thinking what this could become. And I had a paper bag with all my 6 cookbooks in it. And I did my dog and pony show, showed it to the publisher. And I said, I think that this could be really great. Well, they said, well, everybody thinks Chicken Soup for the Soul is a cookbook. And so, because of the title and everything, right. I did not know, and they didn't tell me right away, that they had an order from QVC for 950,000 copies of a cookbook. And so anyway, the publisher says, okay, can you get it done in 3 months? And I said, 3 months? Well, I said, well, does it have to be done? They said, yeah, it does. And I said, well, if Jack and Mark send out requests for the stories with recipes with me, I think we could do it. I don't see why not. And they said, well, what do you need to get started? And I said, I need an advance. I had always gotten an advance for my cookbooks. And the publisher said, I'm sorry, we don't give advances. And I said, well, you don't really need me. You could do this in-house. And the publisher said, well, we're going to give you a third of the book.
Which, by the way, does not happen any longer.
No, never happened to anybody else in that series again. I promise you, because my first royalty check was $240,000 for 3 months' work, which was quite amazing. And do you know that 15 out of those 16 stories that I had fit in that cookbook? And that really helped me get that book done. There was one about a rat that they didn't think was very appropriate. I thought ratatouille would be a great, it's a great recipe. That was before the movie. But I never had so much fun. The intensity of that. I was working 14 hours a day and working on all these stories and editing all these stories. It was more fun than I could stand. And it just opened up a whole new life for me. I went on to do Chicken Soup to Inspire Body and Soul with Dan Millman. But that really got me rolling as a writer. That was great.
That's an amazing, amazing story. And again, to some people who've not written a book before, that's an insane timeline. Number one, like out of control timeline.
Insane.
Probably not going to get 30% of the book. That's never going to happen any longer. And probably Chicken Soup for the Soul ruined that for all of the other types of authors out there. Nobody expected to sell 500 million copies.
Yeah.
But the theme I always get from you is you're always putting yourself in the path of success. I mean, everywhere in your life, because I know a lot more about you than we're ever going to be able to get on this show, but you've always just put yourself in the path of success. And I think that's the biggest theme I wanted out of this podcast was it's so incredibly influential to me how, if you didn't go to that meeting from 6 to 8, a lot of people will be like, oh, it's too early. I don't want to do that.
Right.
Without that movie, you're not sitting between these people, right? And then answering the phone when you're cooking a turkey for Thanksgiving, right, turns into this crazy madness. It sounds kind of silly sometimes, but those moments happen because you put yourself in that path of success.
I think one of the most important things anybody ever said to me was expect magic. And that's what I call my coaching. I really wake up in the morning. You know how you wake up in the morning and it's always like, oh, Lord, what do I have to do today? What is on my list of having to get to? But I always stop that in its tracks. And I always think, where's the most joy that can be found today? And just living in that question of expecting joy, expecting magic, it's incredible. It's incredible what happens.
And I think again, usually when we're doing a story, good or bad, motivational, inspirational, whatever it is, we tend to hit the highlights of our life, and we certainly don't want to tell everybody that, hey, this was all, flowers and butterflies. I mean, there's hard times, but you just kept putting yourself in that path for success. And I think a lot of people call that manifestation. I know John DeMartini, he does the collapse process, which I really think is a wonderful process. But it's breaking down life until you find what you're grateful for. And it just seems like that is your MO. And it's just impressive to me. Like, I mean, what an inspiration. You're still beautiful. You're still full of energy. You're still full of all this life. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, that's like the greatest thing to ever see of any person that walks the planet. And I think that more people should find that in life. It's just so depressing sometimes when you walk around and all the suffering and all the pain. And I think that's what motivates people like you and I to end some of that, because there is greatness out there.
There is, and it takes courage. It really takes courage sometimes to choose to look forward or to look up, or because sometimes it's kind of seductive to fall into despair and to stay there. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I think that we have to grieve and we have to feel sadness when it's appropriate and so on. But I know that if I'll go up to the mirror first thing in the morning and just say, there's magic afoot, there's what magical thing is going to happen today? There's an energy, there's a vibration. I guess it's the law of attraction being relived right here. But I mean, there's something that clicks in, that happens. And sometimes we don't even feel like doing that. We don't want to feel better for some reason. But if we do, then really, it's just incredible what happens. And I just am amazed every single day when I look at the end of my day and acknowledge all of the grace that appeared. I just don't think it would happen unless I trusted it.
And I absolutely believe that's exactly why you're where you are right now. I believe that wholeheartedly. And it seems to me, and of course in the stuff that I've done, the interviews I've done, it seems pretty easy to me. And I get told all the time it can't be that easy, but I think it might be. I think it might be. Just get grateful, get humble, and just look for the good instead of the bad, because the bad's always going to be there. Good's a lot harder to find sometimes, but I don't know. I feel that way, and I feel that energy from you. One of the things is I can't obviously end a podcast with someone like you without telling people that you have the availability to help people. Tell us what you do about coaching and all the stuff that you do.
Well, of course, I still run the Inside Edge, and everybody's welcome to come to our Zoom meetings. If you go to insideedge.org, you'll see our page, and it tells about all the events. And I would love to have you as my guest. Friend me on Facebook. Let me know you're coming to the Inside Edge, and I'll make sure that I introduce you and you get acknowledged. I love meeting new people. It's just totally fun. through the Inside Edge right now, and soon to be in a wider way, I love to teach writing. I teach what I call the writer's edge. And I especially love people to focus on legacy stories. So I'll ask them to get up and go find 3 things in their house that they love, and to choose one of those and write the story about it. Because for future generations, we're not all going to be here forever. It's really wonderful to memorialize the story of how something came into your life or so on. There are other writing teachers who will have you write of your growth and despair and pain and everything else. I just took a course from somebody else, but that is not my MO, as you say. I love people to focus on joy and to use joy as a compass in choosing what they're going to spend their time on. So I work privately with people to help them write their stories or create a legacy project of any kind. I think instead of an obituary, we should have a page that we create ourselves of how we would like to be remembered. And it could have all of our favorite things on us, the things that we love, the pictures of the people. When my husband passed just 6 weeks ago, people always say, is there anything I can do? And I said, yes, you can write me a story or a paragraph or something about Ted and how he affected you and his energy or whatever. And people wrote the most amazing things. So I'm going to compile, instead of an obituary, something that really celebrates who he was and who he affected. So I love to help people identify a legacy project of how they'd like to be remembered. I took a course in being an end-of-life doula, which is where it's beyond hospice, where you actually spend time with the person who's passing and their family and decide what you want your vigil scene to be like and all of that. So I have lots of resources of how one might personalize their own life as a memory. And I also work with people on coaching. I call it Expect Magic. It's 6 weeks of identifying your ideal life vision. So you take 5 areas of your life. So it could be spiritual, relationship, financial, whatever. And we work together to decide what is your ideal life vision if you were living it. I mean, it could be 1 year from now, it could be 5 years from now. What do you want to bring into your life? And then we record it to accelerated learning music so that you listen to this every day. And you can still tweak it and re-record it, as your vision grows. But there's something about really stepping into what magic is possible in your life. So I love to work with people. And I can be reached at dianawentworth.com. And I'd love it if you'd reach out. Maybe we could have a 15-minute session or something like that and figure out if we want to work together.
Here's the thing that I'm going to plug for you. It again, when you're kind of in this visionary type field or thought process or whatever, things come to you and it's kind of the weirdest things and weirdest times. And I remember my oldest brother, my grandmother was 97 years old. She had Alzheimer's, and as she was starting to fail, she was a Pentecostal minister. She knew where she was headed, so it was an easy passing for her. I mean, she was almost excited to get there, right? And the day that my grandmother passed, she was very close to all of us, and my oldest brother, he made this comment, and he said, we just lost a whole lot of wisdom there.
Uh-huh.
And when I think of Diana Wentworth and all of our conversations that we have, when we promote someone or we bring someone on our show, it's because we believe in it. We believe that you are capable of enhancing someone's life, saving a life, doing whatever. But one of the things that you stick out in my mind is just so much wisdom. And in my world that I believe in, is wisdom is the ultimate it's the ultimate gift. And so we want to encourage all of our listeners, if they have anything that they feel you value them in, we would back that 100%. And you're just a wonderful person. I love you to death just from our conversations. We won't end here. We're going to be talking a lot more in the future. I even kind of have this thing that, you know what, you might be sitting right next to me, and then maybe we're talking to somebody doing some sort of project too. I have this feeling. It's weird. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But
Hey,
God, I love you. I love you, love you, love you. You're just an amazing, amazing person. And thank you again for coming on our show. There will be more of you, I promise.
oh, goody. Okay. Thanks, Mitch, so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.